Hello and welcome to the Power Dialogue. This is a show that aims to empower a global audience to understand how energy affects their daily lives from perspectives from the industry's leading voices. We aim to help our audiences make better informed decisions that will save them time, save them money, and lead to a better quality of life. I am your host, Zeddy Bariti. On my immediate left is Mr. Eric Mwangi, who is the economic advisor to the Cabinet Secretary of Energy here in Kenya. Eric has over 23 years of experience in advisory and investment across various industries in Africa. And on my far left is Engineer Isaac Ndereva, who is the founder and executive director at Electricity Consumer Society of Kenya. Engineer Ndereva has over 15 years of experience in this sector, which is the energy sector. Karibuni sana, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Let's get right into it. Power lies at the heart of our everyday lives, and it's one of the most important, if this is arguable, you might correct me on this, is one of the most important input for economic development. And where I sit, Kenya, really, we have more than 75% of electrification connection rates, which I believe is a very good thing. And one element that sticks out for me as far as last year is us moving forward in the ranking as a geothermal energy producer in the world. And it's a very good thing that Kenya is almost playing at the gigawatt club level. So I'd like to get your inputs. What are your most notable highlights for the year that has passed, that is the year 2022, in terms of the energy sector, and why is that? I'll start with you, Eric.
Oh, thanks. um, I think for me, it's the highlight would be the development and publication of the Energy White Paper, which seeks to basically provide a view of what we think the energy sector is going to look like, between now and 2040, and kind of give some perspectives on what we believe the big drivers of the future of energy are going to be, and that's everything from e-mobility to green hydrogen, and we think that some of these emerging technologies are going to play a very big role in shaping what energy looks like in the next 20 years.
Thanks, Eric. Is this a public document? Can we access
Yes,
it online?
it is.
Okay, we'll
Yeah.
be looking out for it. Engineer Ndereva?
Thank you very much, Zeddy. For me, I think last year, sometimes want to even put cumulatively the achievement we have had. I must mention that as a as a civil society organization, we were more visible, especially in the media. And we were, of course, acknowledged by several government agencies, starting with the regulator. I think we have done quite a bit with them. We've also had more interaction with Kenya Power in terms of if we wanted to get information about what is happening. Last year was a very good one for the civil society organization that I represent, and in general, for the general public. And we also want to take note that there are several other installations that were done in the increase in geothermal. We were also happy that there is a thermal generator that stopped the contract. And so there are many things to count, but I hope we'll be talking about them as we move on.
Yeah, okay. 1 Unit 6. Thank you for that, engineer. And Eric, you have mentioned electric vehicles, green hydrogen. I believe it's very imperative that we know what opportunities do consumers have in this green economy. What can consumers look for so that they can leverage the green economy as we move forward in all those plans that are in the pipeline for Kenya? What can we do to make the best out of the green economy?
I think there's an opportunity for the country to translate its reputation as a renewable energy leader into an actual economic advantage and a sustainable economic advantage. The rest of the world is bending over backwards trying to reach decarbonization targets at a national and even global corporates. So the idea here is, one, to get educated about
what this transition means. And there are going to be myriad opportunities as new ecosystems start to form around supply chains. You have countries like China that are now looking to move to offshore some of their manufacturing, because COVID has shown that even they are vulnerable. If you have a lockdown in the whole country, supply chains grind to a halt.
And the
And
war in Ukraine as well.
exactly,
Yes.
exactly. So I think one is to get educated about it. Second is to see where it is that you fit into this. So, I mean, even things like biofuels are going to become important. So there's an opportunity to play in, whether in agriculture, whether in synthetic fuels. Um, it's green ammonia is something else that's emerging. I think you saw the president oversee the signature of a 300 megawatt green ammonia project, and I think that's just going to be the start. So you will see a lot of these ecosystems emerging, and only if you are educated about what they mean, possibly, could you figure out where you'd find commercial opportunities.
Interesting. So, if I may ask, where would consumers look out for sensitization on this, and who exactly will be sensitizing us, really, so that we don't miss out on this?
I think the classic response is Google is your friend. There's lots and lots of online resources around this. There are universities that give free webinars, classes on renewable energy and the just transition. So I mean, there's a whole trove of information out there, and you can apply it using the lens of wherever it is that you're coming from sector wise. So there is no shortage of information on this.
Thank you, Eric. Engineer,
Yeah.
kindly weigh in on this.
Electric vehicles actually is something, it's a good direction. Only that I have found a few in the social media busting. I don't know, I'm not very familiar with the operation, but mainly I think consumers will first want to hear that what is the pricing. We have always thought that Tesla is an expensive model. Is there a Toyota that is using that? We've seen several hybrids. Those hybrids, we don't know how they work. Some of us are hearing that you have to replace batteries after every few years. Those are things we fear a lot. I may not have a lot of information about it, but based on our engagement with the Ministry of Energy and the rest, we should be able to come back to the consumers and enlighten them. Because sometimes, as he is saying, there's a lot of information out there, but you have to do a lot of mining of data for you to be able to know what is actually important for you and where you need to go. That is why sometimes it is good to filter out for the consumers and then give them what is necessary within a very short time.
Yeah, like have a central repository of sorts for everyone so that we know it's objective, it's correct, it's accurate. I agree with you, engineer. And talking about electric vehicles, Kenzen is one of the players that have just entered this sphere. And in my previous video, I actually covered electric vehicles. The price is around 6.6 for a cabin. For a cab electric vehicle. So you have that, and the maintenance is very low compared to internal combustion engine vehicles. So you can look it up for more information on that. And I think as more players come on, like Basigo, there's been a lot of sensitization on that. And I think our listeners and our viewers can look up this information because it's becoming more accessible and in our reach.
But within that context, you still need to assure the mechanics in Grogan that there is nothing wrong with going
when
electric.
When you say bust, what exactly busted?
No, that was just on the side. Okay. I don't know what busted exactly. Maybe it's the lithium batteries. But here, the idea is likely to be sold better by the mechanics out there. But you need to assure them that we are in Grogan here in Nairobi. What are we going to be repairing? Because most of them is cleaning the Kusugua engines and such.
More of the service.
More of the service. That is, it actually employs a lot of people. But when you bring the electric vehicles, then you mentioned that it's going to be less, you need less service. Then there's someone who is clicking and wondering, I don't have a vehicle, but I survive on the engines of these petrol and diesel vehicles. What is it for me in this electric vehicles? But maybe I'm worried about the mechanics. But for me, I think it would be better.
More sensitization on the same.
I think just it's a good point.
Yeah.
And when we talk about the transition, one of the critical areas is the reskilling and the retooling that is going to be required to be able to take advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah.
So it may be that they don't have the internal combustion engine work that they have right now, but they clearly have a skill. How can we retool them and provide opportunities for them in a green economy,
True.
right? We're
Yes.
not gonna be the only country that has internal combustion engines when everybody else has moved on.
Let's move
Yeah.
forward. Sure. Thank you, gentlemen, for that. I will move forward to cuts, and some people call them subsidies. Really, it's not a subsidy. Last year, we had a tax cut of 15% on electricity, and this brought down the price of electricity for some time. And this went away in December, I think 31st of December. We don't have it anymore. And I'd just like to get your perspective. What does that mean for the price of electricity now?
You want to go first? Let me first say there is nothing like subsidy. Because I don't see the reason why you set a price of a commodity, then you tell me to pay tax, and then you tell me you are going to give me back the tax. I mean, the best would be to tell me, don't pay me this tax. That is a subsidy. This issue of collecting, and then you distribute it among the people you want. Like what happened for the UNGA, even for the petrol. You realize that you collect money from everyone, then when subsidizing, you are giving specific people. So if it is subsidy, tell people, don't pay this, but I should not collect and then refund you. It doesn't make sense. But well, that said, the subsidy for power was subsidized for about 8 months. And I report in a certain media that they were given about 26 billion. Now, even when the consumers were complaining towards the end of December, the subsidy was not waived. The only challenge was that there was some increase on the three major components that are very painful for consumers, and that is inflation, forex, and fuel cost. Now, the subsidy was not put on those ones. It was put on the money that goes to Kenya Power. So wherever the subsidy they are talking about, Kenya Power's price was reduced by 23%. And then they snipped somewhere here and there, and then they said that is going to be a reduction of 15%. So now Kenya Power requires their money to be taken back before it was reduced. Now, in so doing, already the three components of fuel cost, forex, and inflation is already too high. So whether they remove subsidy or they bring it back, as far as they are not telling us about the three components, I don't think there is any subsidy we are talking about. It's just playing around politically. Okay. That's my take.
In your opinion, is there a more sustainable way of going around this?
Yes, there is. There is one step that was done. The government stopped collecting tax from inflation and forex. They are now collecting on fuel cost and the energy cost. That was a good move. That saved 1%. That is sustainable, I can guarantee you. But it's only 1%. The other sustainable bit is when they say, we have removed the IPPs that are using thermal. Those are independent power producers that are using thermal to generate, because that is where the fuel cost is coming in. And the forex and fuel cost is taking about 45% of the domestic lifeline bills now, and they are only contributing about 12% of the generation. So you can see if this 12%, the best would even be to say we will reduce our power provision by 12% in the country, but then we will get rid of 45% of your cost. Now, that can be sustainable. But then how to get rid of those IPPs that are using thermal is where the discussion is. It was, there's a team that was formed by the former president. They were not able to go far because they did not get those contracts. And so right now, the best thing is to say, we don't have a contract with you, so that they can be able to avail the contract. And I think basically that is where the discussion would be. Would be more sustainable. The last one would be when the government says, let us not collect the 16%. And then we go like, maybe bring it to 10% or something manageable. That would be sustainable. And that has to be done through the parliament or such. And of course, I think it's a good direction we have already taken. We are in discussion with several members of parliament to see what can be done there. Yeah.
Thank you. Eric?
I think my take is I think what Ndereva is talking about is looking at primary generation. and that's one component. And whenever you see the use of thermals go up, it's because some of the other plants maybe are down for maintenance, scheduled or unscheduled. And so that's a natural consequence. And that's actually why why they were there in the first place. But I think if you look at optionality around fuel, I think it makes sense to look at conversion of those plants to natural gas. Significant savings in costs. But actually, I think the missing piece here is in distribution. And you are not going to have a low tariff with 24% system losses. So you have to find efficiencies in your distribution. And then those efficiencies can be passed on to the consumers. And the question is, how do you make sure that those efficiencies are lasting? Yeah, that and they can be defended, because I think in 2013 we were down to about 14-15%, and it was trending downwards. And I think the short answer is you have to have a smart grid.
What was different in 2013 that we could afford to go to as low as 13% system losses?
That's an operational question for the distributor.
Yes. But then I can weigh in that. The challenge that was there in 2014, we were only supplying electricity to people who are using it. And that was 25%. Now, when we came to around, there is a certain requirement by the Sustainable Development Goal, number 7, that we ensure universal access to electricity. In our effort to take electricity to the small consumers, the distribution lines are too much, or they are too long, and we are losing more power than actually the power that consumer is going to pay. So we were forced to even connect people who are not actually paying for that power profitably, and yet those lines require maintenance. That is where the transmission losses increased. And they are normally different. The highest I have recorded, because they are monthly thing. I know we are used to saying 24% losses. It's not constant. Sometimes it is 19, others are 26, based on whoever was trying to take more power during the month. But yes, whatever change is that there was more connectivity, and there were less profitable connectivities moving forward.
So I'd just like to add, I think perhaps we need to be careful about ascribing the nature of the losses, because we don't have good enough data to pinpoint, and say this is and it's this. I've looked at these numbers for quite a while, so we cannot say, for instance, so if you were to ask which sector of all the sectors in Kenya has the highest losses, right now we can't give you that. We don't have that data. Is it possible to get that data? Yes, if you have a smart grid. And that's why I'm saying we shouldn't be speculating. There shouldn't be room for speculation. Yeah, we should be able to pinpoint and say, this is a problem area. Yeah. We can monitor it real time. Yeah, and you can address the issue. Yeah. So I think if we want to get an affordable tariff, smart grid is absolutely necessary.
Smart grid, got it. Simply put, what does it take to have a smart grid?
A significant investment. I think Egypt is going through the process now. Of course, the Egyptian system is a lot more, it's a lot bigger, and it's a lot more complicated. But it's basically what you're trying to do is saying, I want to be able to account for every kilowatt hour that comes into the system and goes into a customer. Yeah. And I think the last number I saw was something like just under $1 billion it's going to cost Egypt. And that sounds like a big number. But if you imagine the losses today, if you were to quantify them, that's how you're talking about a 3 to 4 year payback. So it makes absolute sense to look at this, and to look at this, I would even say urgently.
Yeah. And just maybe to add a little bit, is that Kenya Power is moving to that direction. You might have seen that they segmented the distribution and the sales into 49 sections. Nairobi County has been subdivided into 3. Then all the other counties are having one county business manager. They have to account for the losses. They also have to account for the sales, because we could be able to see that most of the losses are also commercial, people stealing power in slums and all that. So they are putting some meters. If you have gone somewhere and you found something that looks like it has an aerial, that is for them to track what have they received and how much did they. So they are somehow going to that direction. But to what level they have managed to do that, I may not be able to report. But we have quite a bit of interaction with them. They can be able to give us that number.
Okay. I'll take you back to something that you have mentioned, the Presidential Task Force report on energy. So we are at a point in the country where we have basically three options: maintaining this IPPs, the PPAs for the IPPs, or renegotiating these PPAs, or actually terminating. And in the recent presidential address, the president spoke about retiring Muhoroni. So I am not sure how exactly that will impact our power bill. So I'd like to get your take with these measures, and starting with Muhoroni, how soon are we going to see a reduction in our power bill? If any is coming, how will that really impact our power bills as Kenyans?
Zeddy, I like your hopes. Muhoroni gas turbine is only 60 megawatts. We have 640 megawatts of thermal in this country. Remember, out of those, Muhoroni gas turbine is owned by KenGen. Then KenGen have another 2 turbines in Mombasa, that is Kipevu 1 and Kipevu 3. Those are very few. Now, if you retire one, which is 60, that is only 10%. But that is not the problem. The total generation by thermos in a month is not what governs the price you are going to pay on fuel cost. It is political. Why? Because the price was 4.63 per kilowatt hour on fuel cost, that component, in October. Okay, let me say in August. How it came to over 7 shillings, it was not driven by the price of fuel. It was also not driven by the number of units generated, because they were actually less than the previous month. So it's a political decision that this month we need this money. I think from where I come from, I can say that comfortably. Then again, I have all that data for each and every generation from each plant. Muhoroni, I will tell you how much it is generated. And we have so many, including Mandera and Wajir. All those data we can be able to get. So when you do your total, then you ask yourself, why do we pay more? Yes, yet there was less generation. Even if you factor in some slight increment in the price of the fuels, which you don't also expect that they increase. It's not like petrol. I think there are heavy fuels that we use, which are not gazetted. So again, that component of the pricing could be hidden from us. So as a result, don't expect that 60 megawatt reduction will impact on anything on your shilling. Please don't have those hopes.
So are you for terminating, maintaining, or renegotiation of IPPs?
We cannot renegotiate with someone how I am going to be getting half of what I was getting. It is not possible, because renegotiating may mean you either maintain, increase, or reduce. We are going on that table with an aim of reducing. Those people, we cannot agree. Now, this issue of maintaining, of course, we are not for that option, because we are already suffering. Termination is the thing. And a presidential order of saying, I don't want to see any thermal running. I am not thinking like a ministry, so please don't think that I'm too harsh. But it is also possible that during that Kibaki times when we didn't have thermals, there are times we were having rationing, because we were being told there is a certain amount of time you will not be having power. Now, what is the effect of reducing 12% on the country? And then you remember we signed an PPA with Ethiopia to be providing 200 megawatt in November 1st. Then after 3 years, we are supposed to upgrade that to 400 megawatt. What was the problem in signing a whole 600 and then you get rid of the thermos? At the same time, our geothermal potential in the country is about 7,000, over 7,000 megawatt. We have drilled 863. What is stopping us from drilling more and getting rid of the thermos? So I like the fact that sometimes it's politics, but if you look at the bottom line, you will not find anything.
In the former CS of Energy's last address, I think it was mid-August, one of the things she pointed out was that the difference between peak load, daily peak load, and the available power was about 80 megawatts. What that means is if you have a problem in one of your larger plants and you drop, 100, 150 megawatts, you load shed. You start load shedding immediately. So availability of power is really important. Now, the notion that look at South Africa today, I think they've just gone into stage 6 load shedding. I spent a bit of time there in December, and there are days when you have 6 hours of electricity. It is having a huge effect on the economy. Yeah. Now, you actually have to balance two things: the cost of your power and the availability of your power. Yeah. Right now, the notion that we can say we're going to terminate the thermals and kind of move on is it's fantastical. Like you're basically saying you want to start load shedding. Yeah. A more practical approach, in my view, is to say, can we convert these plants to natural gas? It's cleaner, it's going to be cheaper. They're already located in areas that are, significant drivers of load for the system. So even if you were to make changes to the plant, you don't have to build new substations. Yeah. So all you're doing is reconfiguring perhaps the plant itself. So for me, and again, we talked about this earlier, we still have 10 gigawatts of installed standby generator capacity. So the key is to think about how to sustainably build a resilient system. Yeah. And put in place measures that progressively make the tariff, drive the tariff down. And you can only do that when you find efficiencies in every part of the system, not just generation. Generation is probably the easiest. Distribution is a lot harder. Yeah, and no data that we have tells us that transmission is a problem right now. Yeah, so I think the two big ones are generation and distribution is a lot harder.
Thank you for that. Engineer Ndereva mentioned about the 45%, and I know for a fact that fuel energy charge takes up about 35% of our power bills. And sometimes you are in discourses, people wonder, we seem to generate over 90% of our energy from renewable energy sources. And it's not clear, is there a correlation between our sources of energy and this charge? Is there a correlation or a disconnect? Is there any relationship between these two? Because how come we are generating mostly from renewable energy sources and we have 35% really going to fuel energy consumption?
I think you have to look at the level of dispatch for the thermals and correlate it to your fuel cost charge. Because I think the number was 7, it's about 7 shillings now, just over 7.
Yes.
So if you look at KPLC's sales for 2021, 2022, if all of those sales incurred a 7 shilling, just about 7 shilling fuel cost charge, you're talking about 60 billion shillings a year. Yeah, that's an insane number. And it's telling you actually that it's making the case for even building a new gas plant. You can actually finance it yourself based on those numbers.
True.
Yeah. So there is a reconfiguration that can be done, in my view, because what this is telling you is that you've become big enough that you can think a little bit differently about how your system is configured from a generation point of view, and you can use the existing plants that you have, and you've got a very robust pipeline of renewable energy projects. I think it's about 2 gigawatts now of signed PPAs. So you can also dip into that and say, how can we accelerate this so that one, it starts to mitigate the cost, it starts to mitigate availability. We spoke at length earlier before we started about just how, especially West Kenya, applications for connections take forever. And even after you get connected, the reliability is quite low.
It's not
something
you can rely on.
Yeah, so I think we need to think a bit longer term. Yes, there might be short-term pressure because I mean, the significant cost of living issue that needs to be dealt with. But the solutions are almost always medium to long term, and you kind of track your way down as you become more and more efficient across the various elements of the system.
Yeah. Maybe just a slight addition to what he's saying. I can already hear that we are on the same page. What I don't understand is we know we take around 72 billion per year because of paying for fuel costs. And he has said clearly that that is enough money to build another plant. Now, we also know that we still have 863 megawatt from geothermal, but we still have more in stock, over 7,000 to 10,000. Now, if you look at the operation of a geothermal, it doesn't have day and night like wind. It is, if you want it to be on standby, it will be on standby. It meets all areas, because like now, the installation for the geothermal is 28%. Yet it is one that gives us over 40% of the generation. Now, you look at the thermals, they are giving us 12%, yet they are taking about 45% of the cost. I know you're saying 35, but Forex is also tied to those IPPs that do thermal, because we signed the PPAs in euros and dollars. So we have to foot the difference between the time they were signed and right now, which the dollar is 120 something Kenya shillings. Now, if you remove that component, that bit would come in handy. And we need to be having this discussion of, instead of doing an extension of the railway from Naivasha to wherever, how much money is that? How much does it take to sink a whole 1,000 megawatt of geothermal? And then everybody will feel the effect of that, rather than when you do some other project. So prioritization of these projects is supposed to be based on which is going to affect more people within the country, not just a few of them. So, but basically, I think it's a whole discussion we're supposed to have around it and see which is the best option. Yeah. Thank you, Zeddy.
Thank you for speaking to the Forex disadvantage. That's a conversation for another day. I'll skip that, Eric. Don't worry. The other thing is about shoring up demand. You know, Africa is considered like a hub of renewable energy sources, and Kenya, we're doing so well with geothermal, which we kept referring to, with wind, solar, and others. So I'd like to know, in relation with demand, this is for you, Eric, what is the basis of energy sector projects? How do we plan in relation to demand?
Actually, the way the basic thinking behind the planning now is looking at historical data around your loads and forecasting based on some sort of growth number, whether it's CPIX or GDP growth, and that's basically I'm oversimplifying it a bit, but that's the thinking, yeah. So this was actually in the PPA task force report that was released September 2021, yes, is that what that fails to do, if that's the approach that you take, it's fine if it's in a mature system. Our system is in infancy, right? Yeah. So you have to include other factors such as new connection applications. So if you've got 1.5, 2 gigawatts worth of new connection applications, that has to be put into your planning, because what you're saying, if you don't include it, is that, these folks who are looking to get connected are not going to get connected. Yeah? You have to factor in, what I was talking about earlier, the installation and use of standby diesel generators. Yeah. Yeah? Because that is actually it's an opportunity cost. Because you're forcing people to generate power for themselves because they can't rely on the grid. Yeah. So if you build up these components, you'll see that even the base from which you start your projections is a very different one. Yeah. And then maybe you have a chance of getting to sufficiency. because I don't think we're anywhere close to sufficiency. There's a statistic that if you look at Kenya's macroeconomic fundamentals, GDP growth, even the social dimensions of, healthcare, mortality rate. The one statistic that is a massive outlier is consumption. We are at under 170 kilowatt hours per annum per capita in a country that has over 70% electrification. That's lower than Zimbabwe. That's lower than Zambia. That's lower than countries that are fundamentally different, in a different place economically. Yeah, and the only way to explain that is that we just do not have enough grid electricity available. And when we do those numbers, we don't count, and maybe this is one of the things that we need to look at. We need to actually get data on the use of standby generators, and particularly amongst industrial, commercial, and large residential, because that statistic should inform our planning, should inform our macroeconomic data around the sector itself.
Talking about data, we are currently being guided by the Least Cost Development Plan, and this was centered around Vision 2030. We are like 7 years shy. So are we still on course, or do we need to relook at our strategies so that we get the most out of our planning system?
I think, and you'll hear this, I mean, I've heard this over the years so many times that, the planning was based on Vision 2030, and a lot of those projects didn't happen. Konza City, it's the line you hear over and over again. But if you step back and say, what's the underlying assumption there? The underlying assumption is that the key driver of growth is the public sector. Now, in the white paper, we flip that around, and we say the key driver of growth is the private sector, not the public sector. It's new investment. I don't think there's a sector that has more investment appetite in absolute dollar terms than energy right now, and especially energy in Kenya. And this is across generation, transmission, distribution. Now, we have to be, from a where public sector comes, is that from a policy point of view, you need to show enough direction for the investors to say, we see where you're going, and we see, what you're trying to do. Yeah, and make sure that that policy direction is kept to, and where you vary, it's clear why you varied, right? But that's the contribution to start unlocking this capital that's sitting outside saying, we want to come and play in this sector, we want to come and invest in this sector. Yeah, but that only happens, and that only happens at scale when your policy is clear, when your programming is well-defined, yeah? And when your processes, and this is everything from how you contract new capacity, for instance. The two countries on the continent that are getting the most competitive tariffs in renewables, Morocco, South Africa.
Why is that?
Because they have deliberately set up a mechanism that is an independent mechanism or institutional arrangement for contracting new capacity. In South Africa, it's called the IPP office. They're the ones who define the program and actually conduct the exercise. It's a reverse auction. And in Morocco, is an organization called Massen, which was set up specifically for that, as the driver of renewable energy for the country. And what that means is that it sets you up to be able to define genuinely competitive processes. And that's when you start getting efficiencies in generation that Ndereva was talking about.
Ndereva,
Yeah.
you take?
Well, I've tried to listen on the various what other countries are doing, and I think we should move with our neighbors here in Ethiopia. They're even selling us power. They sold us that power at around 7 shillings. It was US cents or something, so it will keep on varying, but between 7 and 8 shillings there. You realize, I know it is an agreement, and it's a regional agreement for the power, security, and all that. But I keep on asking myself, were they selling that at a profit, or were they selling as an agreement? Because it therefore means it makes sense to be connected to Ethiopia, the whole of this country, rather than paying 26 shillings. Now, what Ethiopia has done, because Ethiopia even sells to its consumers around 4 shillings. Now, let's leave Ethiopia alone. Go to India. Is India paying such an amount of money that we are paying? No. And that is what has promoted the industrialization in that country. If you come back to Kenya, we've lost several investors because of the cost of power, and especially how it has been structured. Now, I agree that the public sector is going to take quite a bit of that power, and it's going to make it sustainable. But even as we are having those standby generators, it's because we do not have people who demand power throughout for it to be. Actually, the capacity we have put for standby generators, those ones we are saying thermals by the IPPs, we only utilize 23%. We utilize them 23% of the time. But remember, it is because that we may not require that power right now. But when it comes to around 10 p.m., 7 p.m. to 10 p.m., that is when everybody requires power because of darkness. I think Kenya is a dark country because it is only that time that you will tell it's the bulbs that are demanding for this. That's the only time you might find that all those thermals are being told, please pick on. When there is light, they will be idle. So as a result, we use them for 23%, and that is data that we have. So this, we need to look at what do we do with 77%, because we still pay them even when they are not generating, by the way. We pay them because they are on standby. So probably that is what is making power expensive, even making other investors keep off. Whereas maybe we could find a geothermal which could not be charging us. And these PPAs, the way they are signed, the take or pay, that kind of an arrangement is what again makes power expensive. So we just need to pay for what we use, and that is how this power is going to be a bit cheaper.
So I think we need to think a lot. Energy is an enabler of an economy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's you have to think about what is this economy going to look like 20 years from now. Yeah, now it's been stated over and over and over again that this administration is going to drive manufacturing. Yeah. Today, if you wanted to build a 150 megawatt steel processing plant, you couldn't, because we can't give you firm power for steel right now at that number. We don't have the headroom. I gave you the statistic from August. Yeah. So what are you saying as a sector then? Are you saying that you are not going to enable this industrial growth that is part of the economic agenda of the government of the day? And it goes back to the question of planning. Yeah? If your planning baseline doesn't start by accommodating that agenda, and it needs to be explicit. So you say, okay, because we're driving manufacturing in these sectors, we estimate that investment is going to require X thousand megawatts. And here is how we are providing for it. And you measure and you monitor and you make sure that the progress is being made across those dimensions. Because there is no manufacturer who's going to come and say, I'm going to set up a plant and wait for you to have the available power. It makes no sense.
So supply should precede demand.
Always precedes demand. Always. Yeah. And there's something else Ndereva said that around Ethiopia. The challenge with Ethiopia is because of how they contract and build their large plants. It's difficult to say this is the actual cost of generation. Yeah, and it's a deliberate government strategy that says we'll subsidize, but you don't even know the level of the subsidy because you don't know what the true cost is. Yeah, the Ethiopia-Kenya-Tanzania line is going to be important in terms of starting to create interdependencies, because one of the ways to build resilience is to create those interdependencies. Because when your system is down, then your neighbor can help you. More importantly, looking at the regional power pools, the Eastern African power pool, once it's complete and connected to the Southern African power pool, you can actually foresee a scenario where you build a plant here to supply South Africa.
South Africa, true.
Yeah, and it's important that we do not get obsessed with relatively, in my view, small, issues that are quite parochial and that can be dealt with relatively, quickly with a few key decisions being made, and think about the bigger picture and say, how is it that we can start to, create dynamic power markets? Yeah, so that you say, well, even when I look at developing new capacity, I'm not just looking at Kenya, I'm looking at DRC, I'm looking at Zambia, looking at Zimbabwe, because the system is interconnected. Yeah. So I think it's important that we kind of raise the level, and we don't get lost in the weeds because of these issues that have been dogging us for years.
But quick to mention that the cost that we are discussing based on the domestic lifeline consumer is 37%. The whole of that arrangement is not going to tell us what 67%, I think 63% is going, because it's a collection. Many people tell me when I go around the media, they tell me Kenya Power is a collection agency for the government. So whatever we are mentioning about the power pool and our neighbors, remember there is nowhere we'll be talking about Warma, EPRA, and those other things. So if we need to really focus on the cost of power, that is where the discussion would be interesting. But we have so much baggage that is not related to our neighbors, because the fuel cost, the forex, and all those things. I would be happy if we are interconnected, because we'll get rid of all those things that we are saying. For example, the three components are now 9.86. Yet that person paying those components that are inflation, forex, and fuel cost, that person is paying 7.7 to Kenya Power and then paying 9.86 to those three items. You've not even factored in the VAT and the rest of, and Warma and such other things. So I would want the discussion even in future to be, what do we do with this 9.86, because we don't have a problem with the 7.7. People should be clear on what is expensive in this power. And addressing the 9.86, there is nothing that arrangement is going to do to attack them. Unless, of course, we get rid of the IPPs that are using them. So that is the bottom line. Yeah.
Thank you. To my last question, I'll go back to policy. And one of the sectors that you're seeing have very favorable policies is clean cooking. And this was bolstered by the finance bill of 2021. Yes. But still, we are not seeing as much uptick of clean cooking technologies as we should, because the incentives are there, the policy is very favorable. In your opinion, what can we do to have more uptake of clean cooking technologies?
Right. Clean cooking actually is having some very good campaigns. And we are trying to request or urge our consumers to use electricity for cooking. Unfortunately, the numbers, as my colleague mentioned, is that we have come from 25% to around 76% connectivity right now. But the demand, the increase, has not informed the unequal increase in the demand. So we are saying we have connected a customer, and then that customer is taking too little for you to realize equivalent demand. You might find that there is one client, who is taking 18 megawatt. One client. Now, the kind of a community that would be taking 18 megawatt, you would find like they are likely to be almost 100,000 customers. Now, those customers, the reason why I'm saying that when we are talking about clean cooking is that people will not want, those people who are reached by electricity, they are in the countryside where firewood is available, or they have other ways in which they can cook. And so
unless you are telling the industries to cook, then it will be very difficult for you to tell someone, my grandmother in the countryside, to use electricity, yet she was only minding about the bulb, and sometimes she can even put it off because the firewood is lighting very well. So that is what is difficult. But again, with the current uproar that electricity is very expensive. Again, remember, it may not even go far, because when you use more than 100 kilowatt hours, you start paying 26 shillings. If you use less than 100 kilowatt hours, you pay 20 shillings. What would be that motivation for you to take yourself to the bracket paying higher because of cooking? It's actually going to be retrogressive. So I can't try to support that if there is that difference in the 100 kilowatt hours over 100 and less than 100, because cooking will take you to the bracket that is more expensive. So even as they are trying to promote the clean cooking, let it be known that they need to do something about the policy on that tariff alone. Thank you.
I think one of the kind of demographic considerations is that the folks who are affected most by not having access to clean cooking are basically women and children, right? And there's an element of shifting consumer behavior here. Mm-hmm. Now, if we say that we want to move them to electricity, cooking electricity, cost is one factor, but the more salient factor here is reliability. So if you cannot provide reliable, stable power, households are not going to change their behavior. Because if you're intending to cook at a certain time every day and the power is on and off, you'll go to the means of cooking that is more reliable. And in fact, there's a study that was done, I think it was like 5-6 years ago, that actually shows on a per unit basis, if you were to quantify the energy consumption on a per unit basis, the households that have multiple solutions, firewood, charcoal, maybe even kerosene, and some electricity, pay a lot more on a per unit basis.
If you have options, you pay more.
You end up paying more.
How? Why?
On a per unit basis. Just if you add the numbers, it's actually more expensive than just using electricity. But the electricity, for many of them, is not a real option. Now, thankfully, electricity is not the only solution. You're starting to see emerging companies doing, ethanol-based
biogas.
Biogas. In fact, the company called Coco, which has grown, hugely. They are now at
ethanol.
Yeah, it's ethanol. 500,000 homes now. But I think there's a lot more that can be done to encourage households, especially, to move to cleaner cooking methods. But in as far as electricity is concerned, until you deal with reliability, it's a hard sell.
Even to add just a little bit, is that 1 kilowatt hour is going to cost, say, about 26 shillings. Generating 1 kilowatt hour on firewood you have bought cannot even go beyond 5 shillings, generating 1 kilowatt hour. And a kilowatt hour is simply saying what is the cost of raising this water from this degree to this degree, water of like 3 liters. That is how you calculate. You use electricity, you're going to find that you're using 5 times more than firewood. Now, let's go to people who are not collecting firewood. They're also buying. Tea factories, tell them to use electricity to generate steam using the boilers. They will close down. That is why they opt to use firewood they have bought, regardless of how expensive it can go. Even briquettes themselves, as they are running at 12 shillings per kg. That is still way cheaper than electricity. And that's why you see how many countries in this world are using electricity to generate steam, because it is thermal energy that we are looking for. There will be always cheaper alternatives all the time. And so until tea factories start using electricity to generate steam, it's not going to be cheaper, It's not going to even inform any grandmother near a tea factory to start using electricity to cook. So that is that simple. So someone should do the math and understand that much you are encouraging them, but it's not going to be very simple for them to shift unless you have shown them practically. And it cannot be shown. Technically, I know it is not going to be cheaper.
So it still goes back to sustainable prices and reliability. Thank you so much, gentlemen. It has been an absolute pleasure to have you on set today. That is Eric Mwangi, advisor to the Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Energy in Kenya, and Engineer Isaac Ndereva from the Electricity Consumer Society of Kenya. If I could perhaps have your very brief parting shots.
What I will say, I will talk to two people, and those two people is going to be the consumer, the Wanjiku, the hustler, and then the next person will be the government. Let me start with the government. That the people had a lot of hope in the promise that power is going to be cheaper. They had hope because they thought industries would open, and so they would get employment. They had hope because they thought that even for them, the power usage would be cheaper. That is not what is happening. They are very worried. Now, for Wanjiku, we would want to make you understand that the government is busy trying to look into how they are going to make power cheaper. They may take time. But unfortunately, as your consumer representative, I do not have very clear path into how you are going to achieve that. But we are in consultation with the parliament, and we are, of course, going to have a discussion with the members of the National Assembly. We have had a busy day with them, and we are hoping they are going to put some legislations which are going to make us realize some cheaper prices. But we have to see, we may not have to push without thinking on the effect of making it so cheap. But of course, we also want to see that there are some areas that can be done, and so the power can be a little bit affordable. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. I think, this comes back to the issue of, what has been accepted as the basis on which investments are made in the sector, and that's cost-reflective tariffs. And I think that's one of the big factors that drive investment in the sector, and has done so over the last 20, 25 years, that investors actually believe the economics are sustainable in the long run. But I think we're at a crossroads now, and we cannot keep doing things the way we've always done them. And that's a big reason why even the white paper was drafted, is to say, can we show a picture of what Kenya could look like in 2040? And just in terms of headline numbers, in the paper, we say we think we can get to 100 gigawatts and attract about $300 billion of investment, and actually be able to get a sustainable household tariff at 50% of where we are today. In our view, I mean, it's funny because in our view, those are not, they are not modest ambitions, right? And we believe that if we chart this course and kind of from a policy point of view, and not just policy but also institutional arrangements, start to drive efficiencies in the different parts of the sector, the tariff goals will be achievable in the medium term. More importantly, we can drive investment and help grow the economy and create all of these jobs that are actually needed. Yeah, but you have to lead from the front.
It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you, gentlemen. This is the Power Dialogue, a show that celebrates Africa's leading voices, outliers, and pioneers in the energy sector across the continent. Thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to your questions and comments on this topic. The Power Dialogue is available as The Power Dialogue across all social media platforms. Remember to subscribe, to share, to leave a comment. Until the next one, thank you so much, and kwaheri.